The UFC is back once again with a huge fight night card this weekend, and I will be going through the entire card from top to bottom. In the main event, we got a pivotal flyweight matchup with Manel Kape taking on Japan's Kyoji Horiguchi in the main event, and I got Kyoji Horiguchi beating Manel Kape in this fight by unanimous decision. Manel Kape specializes in pressing his opponents up against the side of the cage and knocking them out. He's done that in his last three fights against Brandon Royval, Aso Almabayev, and Bruno Silva. And Kyoji Horiguchi has amazing movement. Even when he's getting pressed up against the side of the cage, he's a master of misdirection. He shows his opponent he's moving one way and escapes from the other way. Cap has also shown a little bit of inconsistency in his fights. He's lost pivotal matchups to the likes of Mateusz Nicolau and Muhammad Mokaev. I believe that if he had won those fights, he would have already gotten a title shot. Kyoji Horiguchi has 5-round experience as well. He has been 5 rounds a bunch of times, and I think Cap is going to be very strategic in this fight. He's going to look to conserve energy. This is probably the toughest fight of Cap's career so far. I think Cap knows it, even though he beat Brandon Royval in his last fight. I think Kyoji Horiguchi might be a little tougher of a matchup for Manel Cap than even Brandon Royval. And Kyoji Horiguchi has beaten Cap before at Ryzen. He beat Cap by a submission. And even though that was a long time back, it does play at the back of your mind. So I got Kyoji Horiguchi winning this fight by unanimous decision. He's looked dominant in his last two wins in the UFC over Amir Albazi and Tagir Ulanbekov. And while Cap has looked great as well, I think Kyoji Horiguchi is at that point in his career where this is do or die for him. He knows that if he loses this fight to Cap, he's probably never getting to the UFC title again. So therefore, I got Kyoji Horiguchi winning this fight by unanimous decision against Manel Kape, 48-47. We move on to the co-main event in the light heavyweight division. We got Ivan Cuțelaba taking on Navajo Stirling. And I think while Navajo Stirling will be the favorite in this fight, I got Ivan Cuțelaba winning this fight by using his grappling game. We saw Navajo Stirling getting taken down a bunch of times by Tuco Tokos. I think Tuco Tokos took him down 3 or 4 times, got a bunch of control time on him. Ivan Cuțelaba won his last fight against Umar C via submission. He lost the fight before that to Modestas Bukauskas, which I personally thought he won that fight. It was split decision. He won the 2 fights before that as well. So Ivan Cuțelaba has been on a bit of a roll. He is very, very experienced in the cage. He's been in there against former champions. And Navajo Stirling is still pretty new in the game, even though he has 3 or 4 really nice wins in the UFC. He's looked fairly dominant. But I think Ivan Cuțelaba is going to be a big step up in competition for him. And Ivan is going to get the job done. He's still a young fighter, though he's taken a bunch of damage in his career. But he's still young. He's hungry. And he's going to beat Navajo Stirling, in my opinion, in the co-main event. In the feature fight, you got Vinicius Oliveira taking on Giga Chikadze in his featherweight debut, and I got Vinicius Oliveira knocking Giga Chikadze out in this fight. Giga Chikadze has looked kind of weak in his last few fights. He got knocked out by Kevin Vallejos. Of course, no shame in that. Kevin Vallejos is a hell of an upcoming prospect, but losing to David Onama is kind of a bad look in my opinion. He lost to Arnold Allen as well in a kind of a lackluster performance by him. And Vinicius Oliveira is always pressing the action. He's always moving forward, throwing big shots. And I think Vinicius Oliveira has that lighter man skill as well, where he's going to be taking his bantamweight level skills to the featherweight division. And he's a big, big guy. He was cutting a hell of a lot of weight for bantamweight, and he's going to be really motivated in this new weight class. He's going to be reinvigorated. And I got Vinicius Oliveira making a triumphant debut in the featherweight division by beating Giga Chikadze in this fight. In the next fight, we got Hyder Amil against Christian Rodriguez. And while I was very hopeful of Christian Rodriguez being a prospect to look out for in the featherweight division, I just can't trust him anymore. That loss against André Fili, he looked so flat. How are you losing to André Fili at this point in your career? Or rather, at this point in his career and in your career. And while Hyder Amil has lost his last 2 fights as well, he was on an 11-fight win streak prior to that. He's beaten William Gomez as well. Jose Miguel Delgado, who he lost to in his last fight, is a pretty good fighter. He's definitely better than Andre Fili. I believe Jose Miguel Delgado beat Andre Fili. And Hyder didn't look bad in that fight. He just got submitted while Christian Rodriguez looked terrible in that fight against Andre Fili. But with Christian Rodriguez, you never know, man. He's very, very inconsistent in his fights. But I got Hyder winning this fight, actually. Christian Rodriguez has looked like shit in his last 2 or 3 fights. Andre Lima versus Kevin Borjas, and I just don't understand this matchmaking. Andre Lima is a fantastic up and coming prospect, 11-0. He's beaten Felipe dos Santos and Daniel Perez in his last 2 fights, and Kevin Borjas has lost 4 of his 5 fights in the UFC. And while he's lost to decent competition, or rather really good competition, he's lost to Joshua Van, Alessandro Costa, and so on and so on. He's gotten the shit beaten out of him by all those great fighters. Those fights haven't been competitive, and Andre Lima has looked really good in his fights. He got a finish in his last fight. He beat Felipe dos Santos in a very dominant fashion, dominated the grappling against Felipe, who had a really good fight against Manel Cap. So Andre Lima is no joke, and he's gonna beat Kevin Borjas, and Kevin Borjas is gonna get cut from the UFC. In my opinion, one fighter from Peru has already been cut lately, Daniel Marcos, and he's gonna be the second one, I believe. Moving on, Melsik Baghdasaryan versus Murtazaali Magomedov, and I got Murtazaali Magomedov beating Melsik Baghdasaryan via TKO. Murtazaali Magomedov has had a great one on the Dana White's Contender Series. I've seen some of his fights on YouTube. Good striking, good grappling. Melsik Baghdasaryan has basically fought twice in the last 3 years. He last lost to Gene Silva in Feb 2025. His fight before that was in 2023. So he's been very inactive. I don't know what he's up to, but this can't possibly be his only source of income. Some of these fighters are so inactive. If you look at the featherweight division, where is Yair Rodriguez? Brian Ortega has been so inactive in his career. Arnold Allen has been so inactive in his career. A bunch of other fighters as well. Arman Sarukian, I get he's rich, but he's been inactive as well. But I digress. Murtazaali Magomedov, great striker, great grappler, has gotten a bunch of TKO wins on the ground, undefeated, 10-0 prospect. And I got Murtazaali Magomedov beating Melsik Baghdasaryan via TKO in the second round. He's going to have a little bit of octagon jitters initially, but I think he's going to get over that and beat Melsik Baghdasaryan. Bia Mesquita versus Melissa Mullins. Okay. I got Bia Mesquita winning this fight. And yeah, that's it. She's undefeated, and I think Melissa Mullins is just pathetic. Moving on, Allan Nascimento versus Mitch Raposo. Another very strange matchmaking. Allan Nascimento is on a 4-fight win streak. Mitch Raposo has just one win in the UFC, and he's lost twice. Allan Nascimento has a win over Jake Hadley, who Mitch Raposo lost to on the Dana White's Contender Series. So I don't get the logic of this matchmaking, but of course I'm going for Allan Nascimento winning this fight by a submission. He beat Cody Durden in his last fight by submission, and I believe he's going to beat Mitch Raposo pretty easily as well. I think Mitch Raposo lost to somebody by submission in the UFC already, and I think Allan Nascimento is decent. He's not ever going to be top level in the flyweight division, but he's good enough to beat Mitch Raposo, who is just shite. Gaston Bolaños versus Michael Aswell Jr., two bums in my opinion. Gaston Bolaños moving up from bantamweight to the featherweight division. Michael Aswell Jr. had a close but clear last fight in which he lost to Luke Riley. And I think Michael Aswell Jr. is going to beat Gaston Bolaños because at the end of the day, in his losses, Michael Aswell hasn't looked as bad as Gaston Bolaños. I guess Gaston Bolaños has just one win in the UFC against Cortavius Romeus. I think that guy, Cortavius Romeus, yes. And Michael Aswell Jr. also has one win, but I think he's a younger fighter, slightly better striking, and I think that's going to make all the difference. And honestly, I mean, you could just cut them both at this point. Neither of them are ever going to be top 15. So, I mean, What are we? I mean, I guess we need fighters to fill in these cards, and maybe some of them could put on a banger every now and then, but it's not probably not going to be Michael Aswell Jr. or Bolaños. Moving on, Carol Rosa versus Luana Santos. Let's see. You know what? I think I'm gonna with Carol Rosa. Yeah, she has had a very inconsistent UFC career, but I think she's just got better wins, and she looks more manly as well. So yeah, I think that's gonna be a pretty good judge of who can win this fight. Like look at that. Can't can't bet against that in the women's fights, and that's basically what it comes down to. So yeah, bang of fight night card coming up this weekend. Let me know what y'all think. See y'all soon. Peace.